Hi, Tim. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me. Glad to be here.
My pleasure. I understand you wrote a very interesting book, and we'll get to that. But before we do, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and what made you write this book?
Well, my background is in education. I taught school, both public and private, as a school teacher and as an administrator, and then was also training in the martial arts at that time. And sometimes you don't know where to go, and the river kind of just pushes you there. So I got fired as the basketball coach. I was the dean of students, which is the school disciplinarian. So they took away the fun part of my day and just left me with the nasty part of my day. So I quit and then kind of floundered around a while as an educational consultant and said, if I won the lottery, what would I do? I said, well, I'd practice martial arts full time. So I went to my master, said, can you hire me? He said, yes. Sort of like the old Kung Fu story, said, but you have to volunteer for a month before I hire you. I guess to see if I was going to be serious. So I did. I volunteered for a month, got on board with him, and spent 30 years with him, not only teaching at the beginning, but he had an international company of advice to other martial arts school owners. And so one of the things we're very proud of is the after school martial arts programs and summer camps. And I was the educational aspect behind that. And full circle, what I did when I retired was say, this is amazing stuff. The kids learned great things in the martial arts, but we also help educate them physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So why can't I bring this out to the public? Why can't the average parent have access to this at a really affordable price? Therefore, that's how I got to my book.
Very interesting. And your book is called Raising Four-Dimensional Children in a Two-Dimensional World. Is that right?
Yeah, hopefully that gets your questioning going.
Boy, that really got my attention. Tell us all about that book.
All right. So I think we are living more and more in a two-dimensional world. Anybody who's watching this Zoom right now is watching us on a flat screen. And so you've got two dimensions, width, length, and width. All right. The third dimension is depth, which is what makes real life real. And then, according to H.G. Wells, the fourth dimension is time. If something doesn't exist for any amount of time, we're not aware of it. So I'm not a physicist. I'm not going to argue whether there are four, five, six dimensions. But I took that understanding of four-dimensional world that we live in and said, well, there are four dimensions to human experience endeavor. And that is the physical dimension, the mental dimension, the emotional dimension, and the spiritual dimension. And so if you want to raise a well-balanced child, you should raise a four-dimensional child, even though he's living or she's living in a two-dimensional world.
Hmm. Yeah, well, the computers these days, of course, have gotten the attention of not just children, but just about everybody. So raising a child in this world would be very different than when I raised my child back in the 80s. So I know what you mean. It can be a little bit of a trying experience if the child's always got their head buried in a laptop or a pad or iPhone or something like that. Is that what you're referring to, a two-dimensional world?
Absolutely. And you can see it all the time, not only amongst children, but adults. Some, and this baffles me because of my age. Why would somebody text when they could talk on the phone? It takes longer to text, and you've got to sit there and then with your fingers when you can say in 2 minutes what it would take you 10 minutes to text. But that's the world we live in, and especially the kids live in. And to an extent, I would like to get them out of that world and back into the real world.
Hmm.
They have to be technologically literate to live in the current day, much less the future. But balance is the key.
Yeah. Well, I'm with you on the whole texting thing. It takes me forever to text something. But have you seen how some of the people, young people, and some older folks too, they text like like fingers are flying on that thing so fast. I can't do it. The other
Absolutely.
thing, the other thing though, I've asked a few people why they text over calling, and I only had one answer that I kind of accepted, and it was this. I don't really feel like talking to that person right now. They ask a question, I'm going to answer it. But if I call them, then they're going to keep me on the phone for like 10 minutes, and I just don't feel like having a conversation. It almost sounded like a reasonable answer. What do you think about that?
It has its place.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I will text people when I'm concerned that I might be bothering them at work, at whatever they're doing. And if I get a response, and it's not just a simple, are you coming at 10 o'clock? Yes. But how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. Now I think we need to have a conversation.
Yeah,
You've answered the text, and so again, everything in balance.
that's right. Absolutely. Yeah. And of course, social media. This is a form of social media. It's going to end up on YouTube and Facebook. So, how does that play into your book?
It is dangerous for kids. I mean, any screen time, in my opinion, is dangerous for kids. The American Academy of Pediatrics says don't let your child uh, limits no screen time for the first 18 months. Okay. How many parents out there use the TV as a babysitter? Or once they get a year or two old, use the phone as a babysitter. Here, play with this while I do that. Okay. And it's just not healthy. Okay. If the TV's on, there's violence. There's commercials that tell the kids that they need to have sugary foods. So it's distracting the parents from having a conversation with the kids. So I believe if you can, at all possible, for the first 18 months, don't watch TV when the kid's in the room. Put the kid to bed, watch the news, watch a show, watch a movie, fine. Uh, After that, about an hour a day, if it's educational, and you have to be really careful because the marketers of the program say, oh, it's a very educational program. Okay, have you got research behind that, or is that just your marketing team? And
Mhm.
there's very little research yet as to which programs are actually helpful to the kids. Uh, you Most research at this point says you're better off spending time with the kid with a paper book, talking to each other and saying, okay, what did the turtle say? Why do you think the turtle said that? What do you think's going to happen next? Okay, and that kind of interaction is much better than the kid just attaching himself, learning to love the screen as if it were his babysitter. I had
Mhm.
a crush on my babysitter when I was yet little. I I don't know what happens to kids who use a computer or a laptop or a phone as a babysitter if they get a crush on it.
Yeah.
Then when you get into the teenage years, the preteen and the teen years, there is so much evidence there. They just passed a law in Utah that uh, suicide rates, depression rates, self-harming rates have gone up dramatically in the past 10 years. And current belief is that it's attributed to social media, that instead of connecting us to people, it's actually isolating us from people. And so, not that it doesn't have great potential, but at least so far, the way it's being done is not working for the betterment of your kids.
Yeah.
And even the social media companies say you can't have an account until you're 13, and they're trying to raise that. Uh, and I agree.
When did you write this book?
It's been almost 2 years now.
Okay.
I had been writing it over time, but I finished it, oddly enough, just as the pandemic was breaking out.
How do you approach the fact that both parents have to work in most cases in today's world?
I highly recommend avoiding childcare when possible, and it's just not always possible. Family members are much better choice if you've got grandmama to watch the kids because they give that personal attention. You can find good childcare, but the research I read said that less than 50% qualify as good. meaning they give attention to the child that they need, the one-on-one attention. Uh, it's just like anything, any classroom, it depends on the teacher. And you've got teachers who will individualize and care about each student, and there are the ones who just say, open your book to chapter 7 and read. And so you've got to find, if you need childcare, you got to find the childcare center that seems to pay attention individually to your child.
Mm-hmm. So this book is written in a sort of idealistic sense that under the right conditions, these are the things to do, because we know, I mean, we both know that life isn't always a bed of roses. And sometimes there's a single parent. There's all kinds of dynamics that people find themselves in. They've lost a job. There's poverty. There's various forms of oppression and bigotry. And in the United States, there's all kinds of problems with politics and religion. Did you take any of that in consideration when you wrote this book?
Absolutely. And I start out by saying, okay, you want to have a baby. If you want to have a baby, this is how to set up your life. And I have like 4 steps. And then I say, and if you can't live that way, welcome to the real world. Because chances are you and your parents and probably your grandparents were not planned pregnancies. Chances are somebody ended up pregnant and you have to deal with it. And so once you have to deal with it, here's what you have to know. And so I go through how the brain develops and what the child is capable of. So whether you're a single parent, 2-parent, if you have the tools, okay, my child doesn't understand this yet, but he understands it in this way, you've got the tools to use. And then this is from the martial arts, you don't just teach somebody, okay, here's how you escape from a wrist grab. Okay, now line A, grab line B, grab them by the wrist. Okay, now practice. So you have the theory and the application. And so I give the explanation, the theory, but then I also give the activities. I've got over 400 activities divided into physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, divided by age group, so they're age appropriate, so that any parent, any grandparent, any really a babysitter could look at these activities and have a pretty good idea of what they're helping develop in the child when they play this game. I introduce each chapter with a story, something I learned from one of my teachers, where you say, okay, here's this, you could do this way or you could do that way. Which do you like better? And so I introduced the story with either 2 choices or 1 choice where the parent doesn't do so well, but usually 2 choices. And you say, okay, do you want to be like this parent or do you want to be like that parent?
That's interesting. Is there a wrong choice to be made?
There are certainly wrong choices because people, I mean, I guess just look at what's happening in the news with all the violence and public shootings. So I would say those are people who are probably not emotionally strong or emotionally stable.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a legislator. I'm not going to pass any gun laws. I'm not going to pass any background checks. Mm-hmm. But I can teach parents how to help their child become more emotionally balanced. Right. So if you're wondering what you personally can do to help society and to help your child, do some of these activities. I had wonderful parents, but I don't think I had a good emotional education. Yeah, my mother loved me, my father loved me, absolutely. But I didn't learn many social skills, how to become a friend, just all the sort of things, the emotional intelligence that can be developed with the proper knowledge and with the proper activities. Yeah. And so literally I've got how to develop emotional intelligence. I think it's in the early childhood, mid-childhood chapters. There are like 5 steps to develop emotional intelligence. There are maybe 7, 8 steps to spiritual, moral growth. And they're divided in each chapter. So you can help your child become morally mature. Mm-hmm. So again, balance. Yeah, I want a kid who's physically healthy, who's mentally sharp, but emotionally balanced and spiritually knows right from wrong and has the discipline or the belief to follow the right.
Mhm. Where do you draw your spiritual ideals from? You mentioned morality, and of course, it's very important for children to understand right from wrong. How do you go about doing that?
First of all, I believe they're separate dimensions. And so spirituality to me, in my opinion, in the age of enlightenment, we discovered the scientific method. And oh, these results are, you can test, get the result, and repeat it. Wow, that's amazing. Okay. And there's logic. If you logic is consistent over time. Okay, so these are wonderful tools. Let's apply them to everything. All right, so you believe in God. Where's the logic of it? Well, no, it doesn't work that way. You can't apply the laws of the mind to the spiritual realm, just like you can't apply the rules of the spiritual realm to science. If the scientists were in charge, as they are today, we tend to throw spirituality and all kinds of religious beliefs off to the side because you can't prove them. I think they are totally separate understandings, aspects of humanity. And so that's how I view spirituality,
Mhm.
whether you believe in Jesus, Muhammad, Yahweh, the Buddha. It doesn't matter to me if you believe in the angels of light. That's, to me, that's all spirituality. It's a different realm than the intellect and even the emotion. And however you believe, you raise your child that way.
Yeah.
And so I talk lots of times about, if you meditate, teach your child to meditate. If you go to Bible class, or you want your child to go to Bible class, take them to Bible class, take them to Torah class, take them to study the Upanishads if you're Hindi, whatever, the Quran, whatever spirituality is to you, that's your basis for raising your child. But there are some secular beliefs in right and wrong. Lawrence Kohlberg was a psychologist who developed the stages of moral development. And so I reference that a lot as to what the child is capable of at a certain age. And so you can quote the Bible to a 2-year-old, and it just doesn't sink in. A 2-year-old is interested in himself, punishment and reward. And it doesn't go beyond that until he reaches a certain age. Then he moves on to kind of an understanding of equality, of fairness, so that if we have 4 peaches and there's 4 kids, each kid get a peach. Okay. And if there's 1 peach and one person gets it, a 7-year-old says, no, that's not fair. I should get it. Okay. By the time you're maybe 10 years old, you say, well, the baby should get it because the baby needs it more. And you get that other centered understanding. That need comes into the distribution. And then at some point, you start to follow the rules, and you want to learn the rules according to your church, according to your morality, whatever it is. And eventually, you might move on to universal principles, where it's just wrong to do that.
Have you had any pushback from people who might be religious and think that their way is the only way, and you're approaching this from a more universalist way? And what do you know about spirituality? You're not following the right God. Have you experienced any of that?
I have not.
Okay, that's
Um,
good.
I, I think it's a valuable tool for the homeschool market.
Hmm.
And one of my proofreaders is a homeschooler, and he said, be careful about saying this, be careful about saying that for the homeschoolers. But I want to have as wide a net as possible. And you know, I say right at the beginning of the book, it's research based, but research changes. And so just because eggs are good for you in 2023, eggs were not good for you in 2000, and they were wonderful for you in 1950. And that the research changes. So even if I base my opinions on research, they're not the word of God. They are opinions, and you should take it with a grain of salt and use your own judgment in following my recommendations.
How long is your book?
300 pages, and I tried to keep it short enough to be useful But there's a chapter on uh, prenatal care, a chapter on infancy, a chapter on preschool, early childhood, middle childhood, preteen years, and adolescent years,
Hmm.
plus kind of an intro that explains the whole thing. So that's an awful lot of information to pack in 300 pages, especially when you do 4 dimensions and activities.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a struggle to cut it down to the most valuable. And a lot of it is very dense in that, this is what's happening, this is what's happening, this is what's happening, this is what's happening. And there's not a lot of breathing room in between. But the information is there when you need it, where you need it.
How do you view nurture, nature, and all that stuff? I'm sure you've had those conversations with people too. Are we born clean slates and like everything that we're taught is what we become, or do we have a personality that we're born with?
Probably 50-50.
Mm.
And again, this is research of identical twins that were raised by different parents grow up very differently.
Hmm.
One example that people can understand is you are the computer and the parenting is the software. So the computer is capable of certain things, but the software makes it useful. And so, for example, if my father was a major league pitcher, I probably have the innate physical ability to become an excellent baseball player, but I may not have the interest and I may never develop it. I may find that I love the game and I want to become a professional gamer. And that's how I express some of his tendencies, like the dedication he put into practicing baseball. I put that same dedication into my gaming. And so you inherit capabilities, and then the parents or the experiences develop those capabilities in one direction or another.
So with this book, you're basically telling, hopefully in a nice way, how parents should be trained in being parents.
Yeah. And I call it the owner's manual you didn't get with your child. Because when you get a child, it's like, oh, this is wonderful. What do I do with it? And there's so much you don't know. And the infancy chapter has so much of what you need to know. And then when you get to the adolescent years, it's a whole new ball game, and there's so much you don't know and how to deal with it. And at least if you understand how the brain is working, how emotionally they're feeling and developing, and what you can do about it in certain activities to help them move up to the next level. And if you were like me, I was a teenager, but I was probably an emotionally 7-year-old. Okay, because I just didn't have that emotional education. And so for some people, you may have an adolescent, but you have to go back to maybe the middle childhood years and start with some of those activities to build up the rapport again, to be able to talk to your teenager and to start helping him or her develop the skills, the emotional skills that he needs to deal with teenage life.
Hmm. Can a person buy this book and jump in, say their child, let's say they have one child, and the child is 12 years old? Can they just buy this book and they see some problems and they read your book and they really study it and they could hopefully improve the situation at home?
Absolutely. And what I've done to make this easy, you can buy the book for under $5, either on my website or on Amazon. But if you're economically challenged, you're a single parent, you have to watch every dollar, you can buy the chapter for your child's age for under $1.
Well,
And yeah, I mean, I'm not looking to get rich, I'm looking to help
sure,
people. And
sure.
so if you can't afford it, you can afford $1 to help you with really the biggest thing in your life, which is your child.
Yeah. Tim, it's been a wonderful time talking to you about this subject. And I'm a parent of one child. And you said something earlier, it made me kind of giggle because when we brought our son home, and I was 29, and put him down, he was in a sort of carrier thing. We're sitting in the kitchen, we put him down on the floor. I turn to my wife and I say, so now what do we do?
Exactly right.
Yeah,
Exactly right.
I did all right though. But a book like this could help a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a shortcut.
Yeah. Well, I wish you well, and hopefully this interview or this conversation we've had will help a little bit for you.
I look forward to it. Hope so. And if not, it's been fun. I enjoyed it.
All right, Tim, you take care of yourself now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. And that's our show for today. If you like what I do here on Tell Me About Your Book, then please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to ring that bell for future notifications. And if you are a self-published author, I would really like to speak with you. Until such time, keep on writing and be kind to one another.